is an issue in healthcare, but it's also an issue in other industries as well. The number one issue for manufacturers in this community, in this city, and probably in the state, is that they can't find people who have the skills to do what they need to do. We talk about creating jobs. I've challenged people on that a number of times. Sometimes it's not the fact that we need to create more jobs. We can make sure that folks are qualified and have the skills to do the jobs that we already have here. And so it goes back to what Scott was saying. I know he's talking about the quality of life science as far as education goes. But it is, creating opportunity is educating folks and making sure that we have a system that does that, everything from K through 12, higher education, to then on the career technical education side with our tech system. Our career tech system is the country. But just like everything else, if you don't fund it, we have the system that's there. It doesn't matter if we have the best system in the country, we don't put any money behind it. And that's where we are right now. So I think our biggest challenge, maybe not speculating on what the big industry is going to be, but looking at how we make sure that we have a workforce that's prepared to take the jobs of the industry no matter what.
As of late, it seems that the city of Tulsa in particular, and I believe there's some similar conversations happening in Oklahoma City, that the larger cities are really clamoring for the ability to have local responses to some of these challenging questions, economic development and education. If you could just a moment give some of your thoughts in regards to those requests by cities, and what, if anything, there is a path forward for cities really desperate to say, if the state's not going to have a solution, then we'd like to shot at having our own chances.
Yeah, I would say this is probably one of the saddest realities. It's wonderful that you have organizations like yours who are willing to come in and offer stipends up to try to get teachers to come in and teach the community. You go to Oklahoma City, there's an effort now to try to increase taxes just in the Oklahoma City area. They will offer up more money for public school teachers. That should not happen. Right? This organization should be able to use its resources to do a variety of other things, and you should not have to be worried about recruiting teachers to come teach. That should be something that the state does. I fundamentally believe that the education, the quality of the education you get shouldn't depend upon the zip code. And we're in a system now where you've got 1/3 of our school districts that are down to 4-day school weeks. What that means for kids, many of them in rural Oklahoma, it means additional costs for parents to find childcare on Monday through Friday, so every day of the week that they're no longer in school. That's a bigger strain on those communities, but it also has a detrimental effect on the educational outcomes of those kids. It's tacking on an extra 15 minutes in a day. There's not a whole lot of quality instructional time there, whatever it is, but whereas if you're sitting in the classroom all day on a Friday, you get a better education. We are to a point now where if you live in Jinx, you live in Edmond, you live in Broken Arrow, you live in Norman, you get great education. But after rural Oklahoma, all of a sudden it doesn't work that way. We have a school funding formula that's supposed to balance that out and say we don't want to create rich districts and poor districts and thus have this disparate educational outcomes. But that's where we're headed unless we get things turned around. So I commend organizations like this. I commend the city leaders of Oklahoma City going, you know what, if you guys at 23rd and Lincoln aren't going to do it, by gosh, we're going to step up and try to do it ourselves. But I promise you shouldn't have to do that, and the only reason you are is because of the failure of leadership.
This year we had an opportunity to pass, which I thought we might get there this year, what are either called fire districts or public safety districts. So what that meant was, so right now in Tulsa, about 60% of there, so 60 cents on the dollar of your tax dollars goes to public safety, police, fire. That's where money goes. And so the city has about 40% of those dollars go everything from roads to operations also. So the majority of your money is spent on those things, right? And so, as you know, here, it's because of state law, all the cities can use for that is sales tax, right? So what we see when the economy tanked, remember a few years ago, the economy got really bad, what do? We have to lay off 134 police officers or something like that. And I can tell you there is a relationship between the economy getting bad and crime going up. And so that's when you can at least afford to have fewer folks out there on the streets, either on the police or fire side, right? So this year we had an opportunity to allow for cities to get some property tax dollars to be able to pay just for public safety, to take that strain off those city budgets, because this is where it has an impact on economic development and things like that. If a city is constrained with 60% of their funding is tied up in one place, they always need, that means they can't go out and do other things that you need to do here, right? So this year we had a bill that I don't know how long it was carried by somebody else, years and years and years, and we thought we were there and we didn't get there. So this would have simply done is make where cities can actually put to a vote of the people an opportunity to get property tax to pay for public safety. Nothing else to pay for public safety. Take that off. I say that and I bring that example up because there's not the, as far as I know, there's not the support in the legislature to allow communities to make their own decisions right now. We could have done that, and frankly, if we'd have done that, that would have been a great thing for cities. Maybe it would have been a pathway to do the same thing for schools, but we didn't get it done. So, your question, as it relates to, the support to allow for more local decisions and things, it's unfortunate, because I think that the majority party in the legislature is the party of local control, at least it used to be, is not so hot on that anymore, which is kind of frustrating because all the work that you're doing here, the philanthropic dollars that are spent, all those kind of things, you have to spend those now, and you have to do the things that they shouldn't have to do because we're not doing that stuff now, right? The Parkside facility they broke ground on today, funded privately because there's not state dollars to pay for those beds anymore. I think even with this next round of potential cuts in the federal budget, it'll only be worse. We're looking at another 180-some thousand people losing insurance, and we don't do anything, the state do anything for that, so they're just out there. So I think that there's not that enthusiasm on letting communities do their own thing, which is pretty frustrating.
Well, you mentioned public safety a little bit, Monroe, and I also, Representative, earlier you mentioned just kind of the physical incarceration rate of women that we've had heard about for over a decade or more here in the state of Oklahoma. I know that most public safety issues are really handled at the local level, but certainly they have a number of legislative ways in which we can really equal the playing field when it comes to what we're doing around incarceration of people, particularly in our minority communities and women. What would you say would be the top two kind of primary issues that you would hope to be addressed over this next session related to public safety?
There are two. One is we've got to get smart on how we handle drug offenses in the state of Oklahoma. We've got a system that says we lock everybody up, everybody that we're mad at and everybody that we're scared of. Right? If you're a rapist, murderer, armed robber, I want you behind bars. If you're somebody who's got a drug addiction, I want to find a way to get you the help that you need so that I'm not paying $23,000 a year of my tax dollars to incarcerate you. Oh, by the way, once I'm paying $23 grand a year to incarcerate you, that usually means that the family unit is involved, and so now your kids are on welfare because you're not out making money. So now I'm paying for that as a state as well. It's a horrible system that we've created. So the first is we've got to get smart on how we establish our drug laws. I'll give you this statistic, and it was eye-opening for me. So the Pew Research Institute, the Pew Charitable Trust, they came in and they did a complete study of our state's criminal justice system. They did it in about 20, 25 other states as well. And they broke our criminal justice system down of the people who were incarcerated into two categories: short-termers, long-termers. And then they ranked them. So, okay, what's the number one reason people are in short-term incarceration in Oklahoma? Drug offenses. Makes sense. The rest of the country, short-termers, number one reason, drugs. Makes perfect sense, right? Simple possession, whatever it is, that's the number one reason. Then they said, let's get those long-terms. Those folks are going to be up for 10, 15, 20 years long-term incarceration. They took all the other states, they ranked the top 10 reasons that those people were incarcerated. In Oklahoma, the top 10 reasons, the number one reason people were in long-term incarceration, drugs. It's not in the top 10 in any other state in the country. Murder, rape, all those other things are at the top 10. In Oklahoma, drugs. Why? Because we've got a system that just says lock them all up. The first thing is we've got to get smart on how we handle that. The second thing is this: we've got to do something about mental health issues in the state of Oklahoma.
Yes.
And right now, what we are doing by not properly funding our mental health system and allowing those folks that have mental health issues to be able to get the care that they need, what we end up doing is they go off on their own, they're not managing their illness well, they end up committing a crime, and then they end up becoming incarcerated. Right now, the single largest residency for mental health patients in the state of Oklahoma is our prison system. And so we've got to find a way to address the drug issues on the front end and address the mental health issues. If we could do those two things, it won't solve everything, but it would go a long way in having a more humane and more just criminal justice.
Yeah, I think the mental health issue is huge, and as Scott talked about, the young man who was involved in use of deadly force most recently was someone suffering from mental illness, and had that not been the case, he'd probably be alive right now. Somewhere along the line, the system failed him, and we know the result of that. So I think addressing mental health issues is number one. So we want to keep mentioning what happened in Western Oklahoma because we weren't able to invest in communication systems. There's some of them who can't call for backup and have it reliable that somebody's going to show up. So if you have an officer that's way out in the middle of nowhere, and whatever the issue may be, imagine they may be away, they may be 100 miles from the next trooper. They can't radio them in good, so the systems aren't great. It's a huge public safety issue out in Western Oklahoma. So I mean, I think obviously wrapping our heads around drugs and mental health issues is important. Trying to figure out how we as a state can come up, because the use of deadly force has impacted us here in Oklahoma City. It's impacted other parts of the state as well. And then also looking at making sure we invest, make sure our state troopers can actually be on the job.
One of the questions that we have got from the audience is related to gun laws, and the question kind of restated is, what's your stance on the state's gun laws, and do you see a need for change?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so I have a 9-year-old son, and I'm also from Texas. But I don't feel more safe if we go to a Target and, anybody just has a gun all over. Right? I don't know if I want my child to see that. No more than I want my child, having people, act inappropriately as all that kind of stuff. I don't necessarily think that that's important. I do believe that folks, if with the proper background checks and the proper training and all that kind of stuff, it's happy for folks to be able to carry these ideas we will put guns on and school campuses and college campuses and all that stuff is absolutely crazy to me, because if something does happen and I'm a police officer responding to an issue, how do I know who is good and who is bad in a situation like that, right? So I don't think that everybody having a gun necessarily makes us more safe. But I do believe that the Second Amendment is a real thing. If you have the proper background checks and training, all that kind of stuff, I'm happy for you to have. I'm happy for you to have a gun. I just don't necessarily think it makes us all safe. The right to listen makes us all safe. Because if something does happen again, I mean, I can't imagine being a police officer and trying to sift through and decide, do you look like a good guy or do you look like a good guy? And the sad reality about our world and community is that somebody who looks like me, more often than not, will be assumed to be the bad guy, and it's a sad reality, but it is a reality. So it's how it looks like.
Yeah, so from my perspective, I don't differ too greatly from what Monroe said. I firmly believe that you're a law-abiding citizen, and you have the right to defend yourself and defend your property and defend your family. I do think, though, that sometimes we get into a situation in which you kind of get into this frenzy and think that the greater dissemination is there on college campuses, forcing college campuses. I'm of the opinion that the college campus, or and right now I think private schools are allowed to do if they want to do that. Public schools, if they wanted to open up their grounds, I think they have the right to do some of those things. If you empower local communities to make those decisions for themselves, and I'm okay with that. I do not like the idea that some of my colleagues in the past have tried to say we're going to force every college campus in the state of Oklahoma to allow their 19-year-old students to carry guns on college campus. That's not, in my opinion, good public policy. If that local college wants to do it, they have the right to pass the rules and allow that to happen. I certainly believe they have that right. But to mandate it from 23rd Lincoln is just not something that makes smart policy.
So we had a question from an audience member. I need some clarification on about GPT. What is that? First sorry. So can we raise GPT through a statewide ballot?
Absolutely, and I think that unless we get it done either in a special session, which it looks like we are getting closer and closer to sometime probably in September, if we can't get GPT increased in a special session, and if we're not successful next year, then I think the only way they're really going to happen is we put it to a vote of people. And the oil and gas industry executives, that small minority of folks who are stopping this, they know full well if it were to go to a vote of the people, it would pass. And every politician is going to anecdote, and here's mine. There's an elderly couple that sits behind me at church in Del City. Their daughter-in-law was both of my girls' kindergarten teachers. So I know them well. I've known them for a long time. They're wonderful people, and they wouldn't vote for me to save their life. Right? And they're just giant old Republicans. They just are. And they tell us, we really like you, Scott, but we just can't get there. That's fine. I mean, it's what it is. So, true story, right? However, I walked into church while we were in the middle of the session, and right towards the end of the session, and a huge, big dust up over
had a conversation, freshman Democrats and freshman Republicans had a conversation with Tom Ward, who, right. So, I mean, he's probably second or third largest driller in the state or something like that. And Tom Ward even said the gross production tax rate in Oklahoma, there's no, I mean, it makes no difference to us because we drill where geologists tell us we can make money. And that's the only thing that we care. So he said whether it's 2%, it's awesome for us, that's great, but if it's 5, 7, 9, doesn't really matter, it's not going to impact us. So the reality of it is that even the producers know that, yeah, it's nice to have it as a giveaway, but it's not going to change, it's not going to kill one job in Oklahoma, it's not going to stop them from producing one well in Oklahoma, and it's not going to have any impact, because I've had this question before, it's going to have any impact on what you pay at the pump, frankly. So it is the thing that we know we need to do. Most citizens know that. I think Scott's absolutely right. If it finds its way on the ballot, they will lose absolute control of it, and it'll probably be much higher than the 5% that we were asking for.
Let me give you this story real quick. Sorry, Monroe mentioned that one of the energy executives was on the phone in the room during the budget negotiations that I was involved in. And it's true. When I would walk in, we were negotiating with me and the minority leader of the Senate, the Speaker, the Pro Tem of the Senate, and the governor, the 5 votes from the room and her staff. And every day that I would walk in for a week or two when we were still negotiating, I would bring in different articles, different fact sheets, Harold Hand's numbers Continental, thank you. I would do Devin's numbers, all that kind of stuff, and every time they would argue the sort of the macroeconomics of, well, we don't want to increase taxes because they'll leak. And I go, no, they're going to drill where the hydrocarbons are. They're not drilling in the Smoky Mountains because GPT in Tennessee is too expensive. They're not drilling in the Smoky Mountains because there's no oil and gas in the Smoky Mountains, period, right? But in all that discussion, she kept saying, the governor kept saying, well, I can put Harold Hammer or Larry Nichols on the phone. And I said, there's no need to do that. I know what they're going to say. And so I would bring in more evidence, and they said, well, I can put Harold Hammer and Larry Nichols on the phone. And at one point, true story, I did say, well, fine, I'll match your oil billionaire with mine. I'll get George Kaiser to come down.
All right, now.
Right? And she said, no, we don't want to do that. And I said, that's fine. But then finally, she said, after I brought in, I had an article written by Katie Richard, or whatever. This was Larry Nichols' niece. She started a company, Harvard educated, Harvard started a company here in Oklahoma, an energy company. And in that article, she said that right now, in the scoop of the stack, the big, huge oil and gas plays in western Oklahoma, the second and third biggest oil and gas plays in the country. She said at $30 a barrel, minus 45 today or 48, at $30 a barrel, they break even. At $30 a barrel. Most of you, if I took your money and invested it just in a money market account or a savings account at the bank, if you got right now, if you got a 1% rate of return on that over the course of the year, you're doing right. 2%, 3%, right? If you invested in the stock market and got a 15% rate of return, you're doing really well, right? At $30 a barrel, it's a break even. At $50 a barrel, which is essentially where we're quoting it, it's a 60% rate of return for the oil and gas industry in the scoop of the stack. 60%. Unbelievable amounts of profit. So then she puts Larry on the phone. After I dropped that, she said, fine, I'm just going to call Larry. I said, that's his niece who wrote the article for Fortune magazine. Right? So she puts Larry on the phone. Larry gets on the phone and he gives this talk, and the Speaker of the House said,
It'd be a very awkward family reunion.
it would be awkward, right? But the Speaker of the House said, well, even if we go to 3%, Mr. Nichols, that's going to cost you jobs. And of course, Larry said, he gave the macroeconomic picture, well, the government has the money, then I don't, call it whatever, I get that. But then I said, Larry, I got really one question. Where are the majority of your wells? Where are the majority of Devin's wells? And he says, half of them are in Oklahoma, the other half are in the Panhandle of Texas and in New Mexico, in Delaware and the Permian Basin. And I said, okay, Larry, I got a second question. Oklahoma's a 2% gross production tax. Texas and New Mexico, it's about 8.5%. And he said, well, there's a couple of rebates. I go, okay, if it's not 4 times as high, will you give me this maybe 3 times as high? He kind of equivocated and we got it. Then he hung up the phone. And when he hung up the phone, I looked at the governor, I looked at the Speaker of the House, and I said, well, Larry Nichols just told me it's one of 2 things. Either A, the gross, which is what I believe, the gross production tax doesn't matter. Because if it did, he would pull all of those wells up out of New Mexico and Texas and go in Oklahoma where it's 2%. Right? 4 times higher. If it really mattered, if that was the determinative factor, he'd pull them all up. I said, or you could go with your approach and say maybe it does matter. Well, then guess what's happening? He's using our artificially low gross production tax rate and increased profits on the wells here to subsidize the wells in Texas and New Mexico so their kids are benefiting from their gross production taxes and our kids are not. Either way, we're getting screwed and we need to change it. And after I said that, she just looked at me, and then nothing. And then a day or two later, they walked away and said, we're not going to go to 5%, we're not going to go to 7%. And that was the end of it. It was very, very frustrating. But I'm confident that the voters are with us. Democrat, Republican, Independent, they're with us. And if we keep pushing on it, we'll get there.
So, in kind of the last portion of our segment tonight, and I appreciate both your gentlemen's time this evening and certainly the candor in the conversation, I want to point our attention to civic engagement. And, I can say just from our experience in talking with folks in our community, there's just an overwhelming sense of despair and lacking hope in terms of why get involved, why engage. In fact, I think we're seeing record low engagement efforts, particularly from low-income and communities of color. I'm curious in terms of how we address that issue to get people engaged in the political process and how we increase a level of hope that something can be done.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm trying to unpack it. It's the best way to approach it. Civic engagement is vitally important. You've heard me speak. Monroe and I have talked now for a little more than an hour, and I promise you're not going to leave here and go, boy, that was just so enlightening and lovely, and I feel so warm and fuzzy. Because all we talked about are a bunch of bad things that are going on in the state, right? I feel like the Grim Reaper as a minority leader. I go all over the state. I'll be in McAllister tomorrow, then Liverton, then Eufaula, all delivering similar messages, right? It's kind of what I do. And people look at me and go, gosh, it's so bad. It's terrible. I go, yeah, but you know what? It didn't happen by accident. It didn't. In reality, it did not happen by accident. It didn't happen because a group of folks at 23rd and Lincoln got there by some sort of fiat. Somebody had to go, you get to go govern, right? No, they got there because the people in this state, maybe the people in this room, elected the legislative leaders at 23rd and Lincoln. They got there because a group of candidates went to the voters of Oklahoma and said, here's the bill of goods that I'm selling. And there was enough folks that went, I'll buy that. And they went down to 23rd and Lincoln and they legislated as they said they would, right? Civic engagement is absolutely important because it's civic engagement or lack thereof that gave us the problems that we have now. And if we can get more folks involved who care about the things we've talked about tonight, I think you can truly fundamentally change the narrative. I'm going to, I know we've got closing remarks in a minute, but I'm going to give you my little 3-point plan for civic engagement and how best to do it, how to best be an advocate for yourself. There's some in the room that have heard this before, so forgive me if you've heard it before. But I'll start with this story. In 2014, I gave the largest speech of my life. I spoke in front of 25,000 people that came and rallied at the state capitol when all the teachers came down and rallied for an increase in teacher pay. 25,000 people came down and they said they wanted two things. They said they wanted an increase in teacher pay, and they said they don't want any more income tax cuts. That's what all the signs said. Increase in teacher pay, no more income tax cuts. And I thought, okay, here we are. 25,000 people from all over the state, Democrat, Republican, it didn't matter, with a very clear message. I spoke on March 31st of 2014. I thought, we're going to get this. Finally, we're going to get this. By May 30th of 2014, so 2 months later, guess what had happened? There was no teacher pay, and not one but two income tax cuts in fact. 25,000 people saying, here's what we want, and they got the exact opposite. And I thought, okay, well, there's going to be a political price to pay for these, right? They're going to be angry. So come November of 2014, every single person that voted that way, the way that the teachers didn't want, got reelected. Everyone. Yeah. It's very frustrating, but here's, I think, the reason why. I would have those teachers come up to my office, and they'd come knock on my door, and they'd say, oh, Leader Inman, I heard you give a speech. I really appreciate it, yada, yada, yada. And I'd say, that's lovely. Where are you from? Thank you for the nice words, but where are you from? They'd tell me. And I'd say, well, you're not from Del City, but it's very nice of you to come up here, but what I need you to do is go talk to your state representative. And they say, oh, I already have. And, of course, by them telling me where they're from, I knew who their state representative was. And I'd say, well, what did he say? What did he say? And they said, oh, he's with us. And I go, no, he's not. And they go, excuse me? They go, yeah, he said he's with us. I go, no, he's not. They go, what do you mean? I go, what did you ask him? Well, I said, would he stand up and support public education? I said, what idiot politician is going to say no to that question, right? Who's going to go, no, I'm not going to support public education? They're all going to say it. So if you want to be a true advocate for yourself and things you care about, here's a 3-part test. The first thing is you got to be knowledgeable. Too many people come to the state capitol, they'll email those folks, and all they've heard is somebody said, hey, there's something going on, you need to email them, tell them to vote no. If you don't know your issue inside and out, by the time you approach me or Monroe or anybody else, because we live it and breathe it, and we've got lobbyists and all these other folks giving us information, odds are we probably know more about the issue than you do. Okay? And so if you come at me or come at your elected official, and maybe we're on opposite sides, if you're trying to convince me to change my mind, you better at least know as much as I do. But too often people just kind of get the thumbnail sketch, they walk in, they say, here's where we ought to be. We can spin enough knowledge right back at you, and you may leave and go, never mind, I was wrong the whole time. And you may have been right 100% of the time, right? So the first thing is you got to be knowledgeable. The second thing is you have to be specific. When you walk into one of us, don't look at us and say, we support public education. We're going to say, of course. You need to say, will you oppose this bill that we think is bad for kids? Or will you support that bill which is good for public health? Whatever it is you care about, you got to be deadly specific. Okay? And then the third thing, and this is the most important, if you're knowledgeable about it and you come and you ask me as your elected official to support something, and I tell you that I will and then I don't, you have got to hold us accountable. The problem is we've got too many folks that get to the state capitol, they tell their constituents one thing on the doors, govern differently, then when they go back home and put themselves on the ballot for re-election, the lesson that they learned is you can lie to your constituents, you can do exactly whatever you want, and still get reelected. Until you hold them accountable, nothing will change. And I can't tell you how many times in rural Oklahoma somebody will say, well, I've known him all of his life, and his mom sits next to me at church, and he sits next to me at church. He's just the sweetest person in the world. And I look at that person and I say, listen, that's all well and good, but you need to look that elected official in the eye and say, listen here, you can sit next to me at the church all you want, but if you're going to go to the state capitol and vote against my interest and against the better interests of the state of Oklahoma, you don't get to sit on the floor of the House of Representatives anymore. And until that happens, you're not going to see much change in 2030.
Yeah, I think Scott's absolutely right. I mean, I think the biggest part is the accountability piece, right? You know, when I got into this, I assumed that everybody else was in it for the same reason. And Scott's absolutely right. If you go and ask them, everybody is, and you're going to get a very similar answer from the Democrat and the Republican legislature on why they're there, right? But the things that happen, they don't happen just as a matter of circumstance. There are people making decisions every day of the week, and that's the reason why things happen, right? This year, the reason why gross production taxes became such a big issue, because I think it's probably the first session in a while, almost everybody who came to the Capitol knew what a gross production tax was, and they were holding people accountable. A couple weeks ago, Speaker of the House and the Senate, or the House Majority Leader, put out this press release attacking the folks at DHS for the cuts that they were making to child welfare and senior programs, right? He was attacking them for making those cuts after they had all voted to cut their budgets for years and years, right? Well, why did that happen? It didn't happen because they were having a bad day. It happened because their constituents were calling them and asking them, what the heck have you done and what's going on? So the only thing they could do, instead of being accountable and owning what they had done, is to put out a press release and attack DHS. And so when I looked at that, I thought, you know what? We're starting to win a little bit. We're starting to win a little bit because these folks who live in these districts with these representatives who have all the power and influence are starting to say, that doesn't work for us anymore. That doesn't work for us anymore. So holding folks accountable is the absolute biggest thing. I get a lot of people who come, I get a lot of emails of folks asking for me to stand up for different things, everything from LGBTQ issues to education issues and all that kind of stuff. Oftentimes I see they're from UConn or other places and all that kind of stuff, and I wonder what kind of answers they're getting from their own representatives, because not all of them issues that are, what you would think would be unique to being a Democrat or whatever. There are a lot of them out there, so I'm always curious as to the answers that they get, and I always wonder, I almost say when people come to office, I'm like, hey, I'm glad you're here, but you're kind of wasting your time here because I'm already on the team. I'm already on the team, so you got to spend time with your representative, or frankly, I always say my job says state representative, doesn't say district representative, so I think I do have a responsibility to make important decisions for the kids in Del City, just like I have to make decisions for the kids right here in our neighborhood. But the accountability piece is key, and I think that you have to know, as Scott said, what's coming down the pike, and frankly, know how your representative is voting, because it is very easy to say you support everything. I love just about everything, but when it comes down to it, there are yay votes and nay votes, and it's important to know who's green and red on the board and holding accountable for those votes.
So kind of a last question. Specifically, I know this is something that came from our community here, because the local perception of our largely Latino community is that Oklahoma is known as an unwelcoming place for immigrants. How do we work to ensure that the largest growing segment of our population has representation?
So this year, Leader Inman actually joined us. We had Hispanic Cultural Day at the Capitol. And I don't know if it's ever happened before, but there are all kind of days at the Capitol. I mean, there's like a pecan pie day at the Capitol. That's not delicious. That's not a joke. That's like serious. And so with the lack of representation of anybody, I think there's one woman of color in the entire Oklahoma House of Representatives, right? There is one in the entire Oklahoma Senate. There are two women of color, if I'm not mistaken, who serve in the legislature today. And so it's an issue. And so we did that just to welcome folks to the Capitol, to have that exposure, because a lot of times we're talking about Latino issues at the Capitol. We're talking about immigration and all these other kind of things. We're not talking about business owners. We're not talking about all that kind of stuff. And so we wanted to make sure that we were doing that. So I mean, I think that's a big part of it. The other thing is that we have to do a better job of telling the story of what's going on with organizations like Growing Together, right? I think there's a huge disconnect at the Capitol between the decisions that we're making up there and how they impact people in communities. And I think that's a real challenge. This year, I took a lot of heat early in the session. I had no clue how mad people could get at you until we came around the bill filing time, right? And so this year, one of the bills that I filed was a bill that would give a driver's authorization card to folks who hadn't got their documentation yet. I mean, I was called a lot of names, probably not the worst I've ever been called, but close, from people from all corners of the state. And it's because when people see that, they think, oh, you want to open our borders to people who are illegal, and why would you want to do something like that? And, the things that they will call your children and you and all that, and the places that they want you to go back to. I'll just let you guess where they were asking me to go back to. That's out there. But that being said, we still have to continue to push the envelope on that issue and others. Because the reality of it is that folks driving without the proper education is a public safety issue for every last one of us in this room. And, people don't decide not to drive because they don't have a driver's license. So that's kind of a good thing. The other issue that's out there, and this is one that's really important, is that when folks in our community who, because they don't maybe have bank accounts, carry large sums of cash and those kinds of things, are victimized all the time when called cops. And so it increases, robberies and things like that in our community, which is not great. And then the last thing, which is one that's really important, is that no matter who you are, where you come from, every segment of the population at different times is going to be involved in some sort of potential criminal activity, whether you're white, black, Hispanic, Asian, doesn't matter, right? Well, one of the issues, if you talk to the police department, the fact is they pull up somebody that doesn't have a driver's license right now today. TPD a lot of times lets them go because they got more important things to do. One of the big issues, though, is that when somebody does commit a crime, they are a ghost. Try investigating a crime for somebody who has no identification and being able to find them. You cannot do it. And so the bigotry that we face at times actually makes us a lot less safe, right? But the way that we turn the table on that is doing things like making sure that we're celebrating the positive things going on in our community, that we are uplifting folks no matter where they come from, no matter what they look like, and those kinds of things. I think that's the biggest thing that we can do. And like I said before, we cannot discount what's happening here locally and how that needs to be an example for how we need to operate in the city.
I think that's very well put. I will say this, sort of as a charge to the members of the Hispanic community. It's a chicken and the egg kind of argument in many ways. My grandmother, who's in the back of the room, she's up here in Broken Arrow now, but she's lived in Del City for I don't know how many years, 50, 60 years, something like that. It's a long time, right? I point her out not just because she's here, and if I didn't point out to my grandmother, my aunt, they'd get on me later.
Hey, hold on, just so everybody knows. Scott, how did they know you were here tonight?
It's sort of on Twitter. Thanks, Monroe, for the invitation. I point this out for a reason. Trying to get young people engaged. Oftentimes when I talk to high school groups or college groups, they go, politicians never talk to us about anything we care about. We're only talking about issues like Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security and all that kind of stuff. And I go, you think it happens by accident? bend towards justice, right? Eventually, if you don't give up, success happens. Success happens in South Oklahoma City. Success can happen here, but it's going to take members of the community being willing to take a lot of barbs, a lot of insults, and a lot of losses before it finally changes. And what's going to happen is on the south side of Oklahoma City, now with Senator Brooks in office, I think public policy in the state senate will change because of it. And I'll give you this example, then I'll shut up. Sally Kern was not known for years. She was not known for all the time she was in the legislature being very friendly to the folks in the gay community. Right? That's putting it mildly. Putting it mildly. She just wasn't, right? However, in 2006, when I got elected at the same time, the first openly gay man in the legislature got elected, and that was Al McCaffrey. And Al McCaffrey sat just a few desks over from Sally Kern. And Al built a relationship with Sally Kern, and you can imagine the worlds didn't collide, the universe didn't collapse on itself. He built a relationship with Sally Kern, and on all the time that I was there and Al was in that legislature with me, not one bill that Sally Kern had authored in the years past that were bad for the gay community, not one bill got a vote on the floor of the House of Representatives. Because Al was there, basically, he said, listen, you're not going to discriminate against me and folks like me. And Sally, even though she never changed her heart and her mind, she just said, you know what, out of courtesy. I don't know, maybe it was that, maybe it was her legislative leaders that said, we're just not going to do that this year. We're not going to do that with Al in the legislature. It changed. And my hope is that with other minority groups, with the success of folks like Michael Brooks and others, that you'll see some real hope and not just engaging in the community, but see some change in legislation in the state capitol as well.
Thank you. In closing, I would like you both just to give you both an opportunity to just list out what your top two goals are for this next legislative session, and then follow that by your closing remarks.
So I'll go first. Obviously for me, education is big. It's personal because I have a kid in school, and so not only finding the financial resources to make sure the system works better, but getting smart on how we meet the needs that kids have outside of school. Right? There's tremendous pressure on schools to deal with a lot of social issues, and so we got to make sure the resources are there to help them do that. And there's a lot of innovative ways. A lot of it's happening right here. We're going together that we can do that. So that's number one. Number two, I alluded to a little bit earlier. It's making sure that folks on the other end get the workforce training and things they need to be able to get a job. And there's parts of our district where the unemployment rate has historically been 2 and 2.5 times that of where the state's been. So Oklahoma's traditionally had a pretty low unemployment rate. There's parts of our district where we've seen that to be, if it's 4 or 5% in the state, it's 10 or 13% in parts of House District 72. And it's not because we have people who are maybe enabled or whatever, but the resources aren't there to do it. I was on the Tulsa State School Board. One of the reasons I was on the Tulsa State School Board. I'm very passionate about that issue. So those are two. I mean, and obviously those all have budgetary implications. So obviously, that's a huge one. The other thing outside of that, and the reason why I wanted to do this tonight with Grow Together as opposed to doing a forum by yourself, was to articulate the synergy we have. We talked about community engagement. We talked about things we have to do moving forward. And we do have some fantastic organizations to not only get involved in, but to rally with. We don't have to do it all by ourselves, right? We've seen what can happen when we pull together, not just at the individual kid level, but even on the political level. I mean, we had a race in Broken Arrow just a couple weeks ago, and we frankly, in a district that is not very blue, were able to win it, not because we were Democrats, frankly, but I don't think we won it because we were Democrats. We did it because there's a certain value set that we want to move forward on the issue of public education. It's a school teacher that won it. And so, I mean, I think that that's where it is. It's not so much about blue and red, but it's what you believe. And so we can all rally around those things. And I will say this, and I'll say that I'm saying this as an individual, and definitely not in representing Growing Together or anything like that. We do have some big opportunities coming, some watershed moments coming up in the state of Oklahoma. I think one of those is going to be the next governor's race. I really do. And I have, for a year, a little less than a year, been very close to Scott, seeing his leadership, and seeing how he has taken a minority in the House, 26 of us. And we have been a loud bunch, and we've done it because we have put politics to the side and put people to the front. We talked about principles. We didn't talk about politics in our caucusing. We talked about principles. And if you go and look at somebody's entire career and where they've been on the most important issues facing this district, there is one person running for governor right now that I know embodies that. And so, you know, I have to say, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, that a big thing that we can do, and I don't think that one man can solve every problem that we have in the state. I don't think one man can solve every problem we have in the community. But I think we got to start somewhere. I think we got to start somewhere. And I think the best representation of changing course and moving in a new way and getting a new generation of leadership and having all the ideas that can put us on the right pathway, there's one person who can get that done. And so, you know, for me, party board is something I'll be focused on quite a bit over the next year, is helping Scott and Dessa and their two daughters get themselves to the governor's mansion. I'm sure Scott may invite me over to go swimming sometime, so that'll be another benefit to it.
That's going to get expensive.
But I firmly believe that as it relates to the education of my young child, we need somebody at the top, and we need somebody who understands what we have to do. So.
Would you let him stay in an RV on
Absolutely. The RV hookup's still there, I'm sure.
That's funny.
Yeah, no kidding. That was exceedingly generous, Monroe. Thank you very much. And I want to thank you all for coming out. Thank you for letting the kid from Del City come up and spend a few minutes in Tulsa visiting with you all. My priorities are not dissimilar from Monroe's, but from my perspective, it all starts with revenue. We've got a revenue problem, and until we get that right, none of our other priorities upon which we generally agree are ever going to be met. And so we're at a point now where if we can do the right thing on gross production taxes, get rid of some of the wasteful tax credits, maybe tweak the income tax for high earners and things like that, bring some real revenue and use that money to invest in education and healthcare, which are some of my additional priorities. And I think you can set the state on the right track. But if you all were generous enough to give me all your support, and I was fortunate enough to win this race next, November of 18, if we win it and don't have any revenue, then the priorities that I would have campaigned on, the priorities that you would have said we're going to affirm those, we're not going to be able to meet them. And so my number one priority, regardless of my race or anything else, is to try to take this, try to take this energy behind really finding new revenues and investing in the future of the state and make it happen. Whether I get elected or not, I think that's the most important thing. And then the second thing that has nothing to do with legislation necessarily, we won't be pushing it legislatively. Here's what I think you as a citizen ought to care about. I think the single greatest issue, I could be wrong, maybe being hyperbolic, but one of the greatest issues facing the public in the state and in this country is the fact that we've got a system whereby politicians pick their voters instead of their voters picking their politicians. And what I mean by that is every 10 years the legislature gets to go in, and whoever's in power, Democrats or Republicans, is a nonpartisan deal. Both sides do it and do it with reckless abandon. They go in and they draw the lines and they determine, I want these voters and I want these voters, and what we're going to do is we're going to create really safe Democratic seats, we're going to create really safe Republican seats, and then that's somehow going to be good for the politicians and good for the political parties, but it's terrible for the people. And so what I'm encouraging community leaders to do, because I can't get the bill passed through the legislature, the Democrats wouldn't do it when they were in control, the Republicans certainly won't do it now because it's ceding authority from themselves to somebody else. But I promise you, the best thing that you could do for yourselves is to demand a ballot initiative that offers up an independent redistricting commission. In Iowa, for example, they have a three-panel three judges, nonpartisan judges, that come in and redraw the lines. They don't care if members get lumped into the same district. They don't care if we pack a bunch of Democrats here, a bunch of Republicans here. They draw fair lines. And what that gets you, in my opinion, is better policy. I can take you to the state capitol now, and I can show you those folks who are in danger of being defeated by somebody from the other side of the aisle. And odds are that person is going to be more open, more willing to have a conversation, more willing to be the compromiser, more willing to be the decision maker, the kingmaker in most of those bills. But when all you care about is getting beat to your right or getting beat to your left, then you don't care about the middle, you don't care about compromise, you don't really care about where the state is. And so until we change that policy in the state of Oklahoma, nothing is going to change. And right now, the state Senate, for example, they went through, up until Michael was elected, there were 6 Democrats and 42 Republicans. The Democrat-Republican registration numbers in the state of Oklahoma are not that bad, right? There's a few thousand more Republicans than Democrats, but it's not that bad. Right. But the district makeup, now the Senate makeup is that way because they went in and with computer technology, they said, I want the 48 most Republican districts I can get, and they just drew it up that way, and they got it. They gerrymandered it out, and Democrats do it. Democrats do it in California. Republicans do it here. I mean, so I'm not trying to be partisan about it, but if we care about people, we've got to change the way we operate our government. And the way you do that is by making sure people get elected who are more representative of the whole district, not just a small vocal minority.
Thank you, gentlemen. Before we conclude tonight, I just want to thank you, our audience, for being here and handing us such phenomenal questions. And certainly also I'd be remiss if I didn't invite you to, if you care about Kendall Whittier Kids or want to be a part of transforming the lives of Kendall Whittier Kids, we invite you to be a part of our network. And the best way to be a part of that network is to follow us on our social media platforms on Facebook, Twitter. In fact, this is one of the best ways to get to know what's going on here in the community. One step towards that civic engagement that we talked about, frankly. And further, just want to thank you both, gentlemen, tonight for your time and energy around these topics, and that are so crucial to our communities, so crucial to our kids regarding education, and certainly given me a sense of optimism tonight, and I certainly appreciate that.
I'm going to recount that.
I know.
Well, it's good that certainly, walking around hearing voices that are contrary to
And that
our
ends the
our
forum.
Battle